the channel. My name's Holly and I'm a third year trainee clinical psychologist in the UK. Today we are going to be talking about how to prepare well for your DClinPsy interview, for your clinical psychology doctorate interview. Hopefully you will have seen the other videos and we go through all the whole process, but today we are just focusing on how to prepare well. So let's get into it. Firstly, I want to start with some disclaimers. So each course is really different and value different things, different experience in all of you. They might want research, they might want leadership, they might want therapy. They will value different things. So this is very generic advice. Do what feels right for you. And if actually some of this is, you're like, that won't work for me, that's fine. Like, trust your instinct, because it's far more about what you think is going on in the world than it is about what I think is going on in the world. You're the one in the interview room. But I have applied 6 times. I had 3 years of applying without an interview. I have interviewed 4 times for 3 different courses. And no, I have not interviewed for around 30 courses. So I don't know how lots of courses interview. And I last interviewed 3 years ago. So it's all very different. But this is, I think, really general advice that should help wherever you're looking at applying. It might be that if you are interviewing at a course that's quite research focused, then you might want to look at the research stuff a bit more. If you're looking at a course that cares a little bit more about your reflections, then maybe do that a bit more. But all of the stuff should come up in a DClin interview. So firstly, congratulations. If you're watching this, I assume that means that you have an interview, which is amazing. Congratulations. That is huge. It is a massive, massive achievement. So really be proud of yourself and don't jump onto preparing straight away. You know, if you find out in the end of Feb or March, actually, I've got an interview in May, don't jump straight into research and prep. You don't have to. Make sure you take your time to relax and enjoy yourself. So my cohort that started in 2021, there were over 660 people applied for our course. There were only 90 interview spots and only 36 places. So you have to remember that those numbers are there, okay? 13.6% of people that applied were offered an interview at that course that year. That is really, really small, okay? And doesn't mean that the other 86.4% were not good enough for the course. That's not what it means. It just means they don't have enough space. And therefore, actually, only 5% were offered a place. So, yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant that you've got an interview and you have a chance. Like, that's great. Remember, you don't have to jump straight into doing any prep. Yeah, as I've said. So just make sure that you acknowledge that it is a massive achievement. Well done, and celebrate it as such. So invitations to interview then. Usually you will receive an email first giving you the outcome of your application. You will either be offered an interview, a reserved for interview, or not successful for interview. Then your clearinghouse status will change. When I was doing it 3 years ago, it was the old website, so they've changed it now. So I don't know if it's a bit quicker, but it used to take a little bit of a while for it to change over. Usually your application outcomes are returned between February and March each year. If you're watching this brand new as it comes out, then you will have already received your outcomes for March 2024. But if you're watching it in future years, that is, that's the timeline usually. And interviews usually run between March and May each year. So some people have already had interviews, which is amazing. So how do interviews work? Well, really briefly, they are either online or in person or a combination if there's several stages. There may be a time limit for providing answers. So some places will say, okay, we have 5 minutes per answer and we will cut you off, or we'll give you a 1-minute warning. Some places will say we've got 30 minutes total for the whole interview, so we'll spread our time however, but we'll keep an eye on it. So it could be that. There will be at least one interview with a panel of interviewers usually, which often is a member of course staff, a regional psychologist like a placement supervisor, and a person with lived experience sometimes. If they can't get enough people with lived experience to be on the panel, they'll usually have another either regional psychologist or member of course staff. Some courses do academic and research interviews as well as clinical interviews, and some will do additional tasks that may be on the day or before the day or perhaps after, but usually they're before. This can be role plays, it can be group exercises, it can be written exercises, it can be the deductive reasoning stuff, although that's usually more about shortlisting, so before interview outcomes come out. You are unlikely to be able to ask questions at the end like a typical job interview. I don't think I was able to ask any questions actually at the end of any of mine. So yeah, just bear that in mind. So what are they looking for then when you go to a clinical psychology doctorate interview? Well, it depends on the course, I'm afraid. They generally will be looking for somebody who knows what to expect from training and can demonstrate how you might manage. They will want someone that will understand what clinical psychology is like as a profession and in an NHS context. And for some courses, a kind of commitment to working in the NHS beyond is an important part of that as well. And what I mean, we'll get into some of this, but what we mean by understanding clinical psychology as a profession is what are the issues facing clinical psychology as a profession at the moment? Do you have a concept of that going into it? Because if you don't, then it's very difficult for them to say, yeah, let's pump all this funding into this person if you don't really know what you're signing up for. If that makes sense. They want someone that has enough clinical experience to be able to work as a trainee on placement and can demonstrate this in interview. So they want somebody that will be able to go into a placement after a few weeks and be able to pick up some cases and do some therapeutic work. So that is why some places will require a minimum, some won't. So knowledge of basics like risk assessment, using supervision, and also some knowledge of research design as well. It doesn't need to be advanced for lots of courses. Like, it can just be quite, we've got 2 groups we want to compare, we're going to use a t-test, or if we've got 3 groups, we're going to use NANOVA, or something like that. It doesn't have to be massive. So I'm going to talk about some of the interview themes because I can't give questions, but what we can do is go through some of the themes of things that might come up. So research-wise, you will be asked about basic research design and methodology knowledge, and that could be around designing a research study of random variables. It could be reading a research vignette and just demonstrating that you understand what is going on in that. It could be critiquing a journal article. It could be a lot of different things. And also about how to interpret and disseminate research. There could be things around that. And applying research to practice is probably the biggest thing, because that is something that clinical psychologists do all the time, not just for themselves, but for the team around them and for other disciplines as well. In terms of clinical, then you might be looking at clinical situations, what you might do or what you have done with clients, supervisors, colleagues, those sorts of things. And the application, again, similar to the research, application of theory and models to real life situations. Actually, that is one of the biggest things. What are the wider issues? So what's the current context of clinical psychology? What are the future directions for clinical psychology? And how do we widen access to courses and clinical psychology and issues such as diversity as well, which kind of links in with that widening access? So those are some of the interview themes. And now I think we're going to get into some preparation. So we have created a range of resources. Hopefully you will have seen the videos already. I will link them down below, all the ones that are relevant for the DClin interviews particularly, but I will put an application one in there as well. But we have created some downloadable resources that you can buy from our shop that I will pop down below as well. They are £2.50 each to download as a PDF, and we also have a physical copy of some of them. Before I show you them, I really am committed to widening access to clinical psychology, which is partly why we provide loads of free resources on YouTube. I will absolutely give you a free copy of either of these and any future resources if you email me. So I'll put my email down in the description as well. You do not have to buy it. If you can't, there's no need to explain why you cannot or why you will not. It's fine. Just drop me an email and ask for whichever one that you want, and I will send it to you. All right. So the one that we did first was our reflective practice workbook, and this has lots of different reflective practice models that you can use, because we talk about that a lot. And actually, that's one of the reasons I started the YouTube channel, was around sharing knowledge about reflective models. I was given the feedback in one of my interviews in 2020 to start using reflective models more to talk about my clinical work and my experiences. And I didn't really know any reflective models, so I learned about them and then put them up on YouTube and shared them widely. And I think if I'd had this workbook, it probably would have helped me. So it's not just around the DClin interviews, this workbook, but it's more around helping you develop if you're a pre-qualified psychologist. The other one that we have is the DClinPsy Interviews Handbook, which is probably more relevant to lots and lots of you watching, which goes through the whole process of what the basics are for interviews. And there we go. How to answer questions is one of them. Hopefully you can see that there. We've got tips for preparing case studies, for doing research. It's basically what we go through in this video, but in lots more detail. And there's space to, you know, jot down any notes that you've got and kind of do some exercises and reflect on different things. So hopefully it will be helpful for you. We have also created, we have a printed copy, which it feels like my wildest dreams come true, to be honest, that we've actually got something like tangible right here. But we do have some physical copies. I do have to charge a little bit more for these because they cost me so much to print in small batches. There you go. Hopefully that will be helpful for anyone that really wants them. Again, I'll put the link down in the show. So let's get into some of the basics of the preparation then. Try to prioritize your sleep the night before. Well, this is really for the interview day, I guess, more these kind of really basic stuff. It's not groundbreaking. We advise our clients this all the time, but I think it's fundamental. Eating breakfast on the interview day, drinking enough water, and trying only to limit your caffeine because it just makes us more shaky and anxious. Using some of those anxiety management techniques that you might have. So breathing exercises, safe space imagery, and this is one that I really like. I imagine my loved ones behind me, and not in a we're watching you sort of way, but just in a like supportive, we are here behind you, you're not on your own, like, because I think sometimes in a panel interview there's a lot of people and it can make you feel really small and like you don't really know what you're doing and you're not part of the powered group in that interaction. And I think just having people behind you can make it makes me feel like I can charge forward, which is nice. And mindset. I think mindset is a big one. Actually, I would say most people that interview are capable of getting onto training, but it's all about a large part of it is around your mindset and how you are on the day. So remind yourself that you have worked really hard for this interview and that you have met their shortlisting criteria. So the interview is your chance to show them how you would approach training and show them everything that you know and show them how wonderful you are. So we come to the final bit of actually what this video is really about. What should I prepare? Firstly, you want to think about some course information. Okay, what is the course ethos? What do they teach? What modalities do they teach? What do they really value in trainees? What sort of trainee do they want to have at the end? You know, what sort of clinical psychologist do they want to have graduating from that course? Really thinking about the extra stuff on the course that might be available, like BABCP accreditation, AFT accreditation, whether you can do your first bit of your clinical neuropsychologist training. Have a look at those particular things. And also, how do they manage diversity, in not just in terms of sort of ethnicity and race, but how do they manage with disability? How supportive are they of that? Look at those sorts of things. Case studies. You definitely want to think about some case studies. Formulation models. And don't worry, we're going to break all these down and we're going to go through them really in detail, so don't worry too much. Case studies, formulation models, a recent research paper that you've read related to your work, reflections, personal and professional, and a consideration of wider clinical psychology issues, and also some anxiety management techniques for how you would manage on the day. So we're going to go through them all one by one and give you a little bit more detail. So course information. You want to do some focused reading and research on the course that you're interviewing for. Look at their web pages, look at their clearinghouse entry, look at any YouTube or Instagram accounts where trainees are on that course, look at any Facebook groups, any posts that have been around. Have a look. Look at the trainee clinical psychologist job description and person specification as well, which will be standard across the courses usually, but just have a look at, there should be one on Clearinghouse. If your course values research, look up research design and particular analyses. If your course teaches systemic as a secondary modality, you could read up a bit about this, just to have a slight awareness of some of the things that are particular to that course. Recent research studies related to your clinical experience as well, and DClinPsy competencies. In terms of case studies, so you need to prepare 2 or 3 clinical case studies, and I would say 1 research case study. So what do we mean by that? Clinically, we are thinking about difficult experiences or experiences that you learned a lot from or where you demonstrate key skills. I actually can't remember what my case studies were that I prepared. I can't remember. You can choose to do one where something went really well and one where something didn't go so well that you learned from. And I think having that kind of dichotomy is really helpful. And then one perhaps that you feel really uncomfortable about, maybe. I don't know. Because I think discomfort is interesting, and there's a lot of room for reflection in that. In terms of research, you want to be thinking about research that you have conducted or been heavily involved with. And you need to be able to break down what you did step by step. So you want to talk about your aims, really brief. Like, we aimed to explore depression in 5 to 8 year olds. Really, that's your aim. It doesn't need to be, we thought about this and we thought about this. Just really brief, because that's not the thing they're interested in. Same with hypotheses. Again, what was your hypothesis? Well, we hypothesized that 5 to 8 year olds would have comparable levels of depression with the general population. I don't know, whatever it is that whatever the hypothesis is. One sentence for aims, one sentence for hypotheses. Methods, you need a little bit more. So you want to be thinking about what design did you use, and then analysis. What analysis did you use? What measures did you use? How did you recruit your sample? Those sorts of things. Were there any issues with that? Then your results, what were the key findings and what conclusions did you draw from that? What's the application to practice and or training as well? So how is that research, and this goes for clinical actually, how does that clinical case study prepare you for training? And how does that research case study prepare you for training? And what you can do is think about, I think the research one's fairly self-explanatory. It will prepare you for research on the course. But for thinking about, so if you are talking about a case where something didn't go quite so well and you didn't risk assess fully, or let's use that, there wasn't a full risk assessment done, and actually someone, a risk happened basically, then you can think about, well, that's going to be really helpful for training, because it will be helpful for when we have risk assessment teaching, because I'll have clinical experience to draw on. And for placement, it will be really important, because as a trainee we have a certain level of autonomy that we probably would not have had as pre-training roles. So absolutely, we don't have clinical responsibility, but we still have a responsibility, obviously, in a duty of care. So, and we tend to do a lot more risk stuff as you get onto training as compared to before. So yeah, then that's how I would do it. I think about that link to training. And what I would do is use some reflective models to help you think about the clinical cases, particularly where there's discomfort, because where there's discomfort, there's something to reflect on. That's really key. If you're feeling uncomfortable, ask yourself why. Because sometimes we don't even know, and sometimes we can't even find out. It's really strange. So I would really encourage you to have a go. Formulation models then. So what do we mean by this? We mean different therapeutic models. And what I would do is practice applying a different range of different ones to different vignettes. You can write vignettes yourself. Base them on clients that you've had, if you like, or a composite. I'll say, what would a client be that I would find really difficult to work with? Would it be somebody different from me? Would it be somebody dealing, who's in crisis? What would it be? Just think about different vignettes. And models can include things like CBT, ACT, CFT. It can include psychodynamic, systemic, power threat meaning, or integrative. Just integrating a range of models. I think it can be helpful to try and choose a model that you've used before with a client, because you will talk about it in a different way than if you're hypothetically trying to do it. But play around with them, and you can link some of these, trying to choose a model that is taught on your course. So CBT will be taught, but choosing another model could be quite helpful as well. It just shows, you can link that in to say, look, I know what is taught on this course, so that's why I use this model. I wouldn't say it's essential though. In terms of research, let's go on to research then. So I would advise you to choose a research paper you have recently read or looked one up. I hadn't recently read a research paper that was suitable, so I'd looked one up. Link it to your current practice. Okay, so before, when I interviewed in 2021, I was an assistant working in primary care mental health, and with half the time was that and half the time was older adults. So I looked up a paper around, it's something to do with CBT for older adults, but using like online CBT basically, and increasing the provision of online CBT for older adults who are the demographic probably with the least access to online resources. So it was around that, and that's basically what I was doing in my job. So there was a link to the practice as well, because that's really what they're asking. They're checking with, if they're asking about research, you know, tell us about a recent paper that you've read or something like that. They will be asking you, what they're asking there is, can you disseminate research? Can you read research? Can you internalize that research, process it, and then disseminate it to people in simple language? And can you link it to your practice? That's the kind of secret, subtle little bit that they may not ask. So, for example, if you work in CAMS, search Google Scholar or another database for recent research papers exploring mental health in children and adolescents. Or you can specify that with, like I said, depression in 5-year-olds or whatever it is, OCD in, you know, in people, or trauma, for example. And then I would prepare how you would discuss the paper if you were asked to. So you need to learn kind of again, briefly, the aims, the hypotheses, the brief methods, research design, how they got their participants, roughly how many participants-ish. You don't have to remember it like super clearly, but just a ballpark. Results and conclusions, just so you can explain what that is. And then link to your current practice. Think about what you learned and how you applied it to your practice, if that makes sense. And what learning would you bring onto training from that paper? So reflection then. We're on to reflection. As I said, feedback I had in 2020 was to use reflective models to better understand my experience. And I started to keep a reflective portfolio for that. So I would choose situations that I'd been in, clinical situations usually, that I had been in previously, and I'd choose a reflective model to just play around with it and just think about those experiences. And then I started, once I kind of gone through the back catalogue, as it were, of experiences that I'd never really reflected on, then I went on to other things. And I think this is something I had been doing for a year probably before my interview. So which is why my portfolio looks like that. It's a big boy, because I like to print stuff, and yeah, I just had a long I went through a lot of different things. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be this, okay? Like, it really doesn't. And it doesn't have to be formal. It can be just thinking about it. It doesn't have to be written down and reflecting. But it's an option if you are that sort of person that likes to do that. We have done a range of videos and have some resources to help you do this. Hopefully you can have a look down at the reflective models in the description. I'll put all of the links in there for you. But the biggest thing I would encourage you with reflection, as I said before, is where you are feeling uncomfortable or embarrassed or guilty or any of those sort of more negative, kind of potentially confusing emotions, think about those experiences, because there will be something there. Where's that discomfort coming from? Why is it coming up? Is it something to do with your social graces? If you're not sure what the social graces are, I'll link the video down below so you can have a look. But those are they're the experiences I would try and lean into and try and explore a little bit more, because it's much more interesting to have somebody talk about an experience where they feel really uncomfortable in an interview, rather than, oh yes, I'm a brilliant assistant and I had this case and I thought it was going to go really badly, but actually it went really, really well and I learned loads and I'm great. Like, that's great too, and it's really helpful, but it's more interesting. And I think you would potentially stand out a little bit more if you're thinking about, yeah, I had this case and it made me feel really uncomfortable. And I had to spend quite a lot of time thinking about why that was. And I kind of thought about the social graces model and was thinking about actually what were the similarities and differences between me and the person in this situation with me. And I realised that they were actually really similar to me, and there were some things that was coming up for me, you know, blah blah blah. You can go on like that, but it's more interesting. Hopefully you can see a bit of the difference. I really did exaggerate those two examples, I'm sure. So we're on to wider issues. I would consider looking at the long-term plan for the NHS and the 5-year forward view, because lots of services were commissioned off the back of these, and yeah, just have a look, have an awareness of them, as well as the NHS Constitution. Just an awareness of them, just some of the key values of the NHS. I mean, they're all fairly common sense, and if you've worked in the NHS before, you will probably know that, you know, making sure that it's accessible to all, that there's no discrimination, all of these things that are very important but may still happen. But think about those and what they mean for clinical psychology. The most important thing is what you think. actually. So what have you noticed while working in clinical psychology as key issues? What's been a key issue in the team that you're currently working in? Have there been any similarities with previous posts that you've had? How do you feel about them? How do you feel about those issues? Do you feel fine with them? Do you feel like, it doesn't really bother me because I'm in it now? And like, how does it feel? How does it feel for you? And how do you feel about the future of clinical psychology? You know, if you are successful in this interview, you'll be a trainee and then you'll be a qualified clinical psychologist. And it's important to think about what it means for you. Some examples of possible issues, but I really would encourage you to think about what you've noticed, because you will speak about it in a different way. So widening access to clinical psychology as a profession for underrepresented groups, staffing in the NHS, not just in clinical psychology, but other staff teams too. NHS versus private, institutional racism. There are some big boys there, really important ones. So have a think about how you feel about some of those and what you've noticed. If you've not noticed any institutional racism, I'm pleased that you haven't experienced that, firstly, or noticed it. But it might just be that actually you are not part of the group that would be affected by it. So have a think about times where actually that could have happened. Read some case studies, read some news articles, have a look at some trainee Instagram and YouTube accounts from people that are different to you or might have experienced these sorts of things before, and they may talk about them. They may not, but they may. Hopefully that helps. Managing anxiety then. I mean, most of us will have our own ways of managing our anxiety, but interviews can be really anxiety provoking. So I would just encourage you to play around with a few different techniques and put yourself in a few situations where your anxiety peaks and just try and practice calming down. And the things that help me are breathing deeply. If I'm nervous about walking into a room, I will go and I'll breathe out as I walk in. And I always, it just helps me. It just gives me a bit of buoyancy and a bit of confidence. Safe space imagery, so you can think about where you actually feel safe most. So just closing your eyes for a minute and just imagining that's where you are can be helpful. And visualizing the best outcome can sometimes lift our spirits, because anxiety, we can often spiral into it's going to be rubbish, I can't cope, oh my god. So visualizing the best outcome and just thinking, I'm just going to do a thought experiment and just imagine what it would be like. Go on like that, possibly. But you will have your own ways, so I'd encourage you to practice that. So we've gone through what I think you should prepare, and now I'm going to go through some really general tips. So think about your perspective. Okay, just what do you think? What are the things that you value, and what do you want to bring to training? What sort of work do you want to do as a clinical psychologist, like a qualified clinical psychologist? Because you may not have loads of say as a trainee as to where you're placed, but what do you want to do afterwards at the moment? And that can change. You're not, committed. What do you think clinical psychology will look like in the future? What do you want it to look like? And what you could do as well, and this actually really helped for me. Because it was an online interview for me, but I think you could do it in person too. It just might be a bit different. So I had a pad of paper, because I'm really visual, so I need to see questions. I need to have a plan kind of written down. Otherwise I'll just waffle, which is why these PowerPoints are helpful. So you can, when they're asking you a question or when you first get in the interview, just do a bit of a brain dump, or before you go in, any worries, any random thoughts. You could do just jotting down random words. I think I wrote quite a lot of swear words when I did my brain dump at the beginning of the interview, but it kind of helped to get them out. So you can do that as well. And remember, you cannot know everything. Okay, so if they ask you a general question I don't know, how can clinical psychologists remove discrimination in the NHS? That is a massive question, and the answer is not going to be 5 minutes long to actually appropriately answer that question. So all you can do is be specific and think, I could be talking about X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to focus on A, B, and C, because that's they are things that I've had experience with, and they're the bits that I think are the priority for tackling discrimination. That sort of thing. You can't know everything, all right? And it's completely okay in an interview to go, I actually don't know. Let me think about that. And they're not asking you anything to trip you up. They're not. But they are just asking really general questions, because you can answer them in any way that you want, So remember that you can't know everything, and just do your best. and you will have the skills and the knowledge and experience to be able to answer that question. So try not to worry too much. So in summary then, massive congratulations for getting an interview. It is huge. It's a really big achievement, as you know, I'm sure, but make sure that you celebrate. Be focused with your preparation and actually don't over prepare. This is my problem. So in the first year that I interviewed was 2019. I didn't know anything, I didn't know anything about how the interviews worked. I didn't really work in clinical psychology very much. I didn't have much experience. It was difficult. So, I just read absolutely everything that I possibly could, and over prepared massively. And my head was just like a swimming pool with piranhas in it. It just couldn't make any sense of anything. So don't over prepare either. Most importantly, think about what you think and what you have experienced. That is much more interesting than, I have read the 5-year forward view and I know that the mental health is a big priority for the NHS. Yeah. Everyone knows that. But what do you think? Do you think that you've noticed the NHS actually listening to that and prioritising mental health or not? What's your experience been? Breathe, smile, use your anxiety management techniques. And I wish you just all the luck in the world for your interview. Please always drop me a little message to let me know if you found this useful, or let me know the outcome of your interview, because I really like to hear people getting on, because it's a really nice story. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today, and hopefully the description will have all the things in it, including all the videos that we've made for you, reflective models, all the resources that you can get downloadable, and our email address if you want them for free. Take care, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.